Let's cut through the Pacers offseason rumors. What have we heard so far about the Pacers free agency plans potentially? Plus, let's talk some more about some of the back end free agents for the Pacers. Doug McDermott, James Johnson, Kendall Brown, two-way guys. Lots of considerations to get to on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Thursday, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today, boy, oh boy, do we have a lot to get into. We're going to make this a hybrid show, two different things. Part one-ish will be the rumors that we've gotten so far about the Pacers offseason. Their roster is largely pretty full, so there's not a lot of rumors flying around about the team because there's not a lot they can reasonably do in their situation, and yet they're still pretty substantial. I've alluded to them. Let's dive into them in more detail today because there's some specifics on both sides of both reports that I think are necessary. Then at the end, because I can't talk about both of them for the whole show, we'll do a little more detailed breakdowns of free agency for the guys that do not merit their own episode. Doug McDermott, James Johnson, Kendall Brown, the two-way guys, Oscar Tshiebwe, Quentin Jackson, and Isaiah Wong, and tie it all together so that we have a good preview of everything you need to know ahead of Pacers free agency, which could be coming very soon because the Celtics won Game 3. The finals could end soon. Teams can negotiate with their own guys. Once that's over, I'll be very curious what timing of reporting that leads to. If players will even agree to a deal before every team can negotiate with them legally, or what that will look like, although I think we all know. So I'll be very curious if we could, in theory, start hearing deals trickle in Saturday, depending on how Game 4 of this series goes. So got to have as many bases covered as possible. Let's start with Pascal Siakam. Alluded to it a lot. Did a whole free agency episode with Tyler Smith on this. And Shams Charania, a lot of people have reported through the times since the trade about what the expectation is for the Pacers and Siakam in this coming free agency, and that most around the league expect there will be an agreement and all that. And that's great. And I think that's extremely relevant. What we've heard since the offseason started from Shams about the reporting is that expectation still exists, right? He said in his in The Athletic that he is told there's mutual interest between the Pacers and Siakam in getting a deal done this offseason. And the Pacers understand it'll take a max level type contract to keep the forward, who will be an unrestricted free agent. That's the part that doesn't get talked about as much, is the specifics, right? And he went on Run It Back TV, FanDuel's sports talk show. He was talking about that. I can't remember who the rest of the TV was, but he called it the priority for the Pacers, obviously, which is something they said. And he said the heavy lifting on the Pascal Siakam front has been done on both sides. Then later, they understand it's a maximum level contract that you're going to have with Pascal Siakam. That's why preparing to offer this. That's what they're preparing to offer this summer, and he wants to be there. There's a mutual interest in getting a deal done. So the FanDuel TV Run It Back part that is separate from what has been largely talked about is that Siakam directly, it says, and he wants to be there, is what Shams reported, right? So, of course, that's great news for the Pacers. And again, that's the expectation of most, that they will try to re-sign him. The other detail that matters to me in this is the max level part. And if you listen to the episode with Tyler and I running through all of Siakam's free agency considerations, right? What the Pacers will think about, is there any actual wiggle room to negotiate what Siakam could want at this stage? At the end, we talked a little bit about, could this be a shorter deal? Is there merit to that? Could Pascal think about that? But we landed on no with acknowledgments that, yes, it's possible that he considers it. But as I think is important from Shams in two different places reporting, a max level commitment or a max commitment, which has been what I've expected and what the reporting has suggested since January, would be, if it's a max level deal, it's a 5-year deal. Maybe it doesn't hit the full 240, whatever it ends up being, depending on where the cap lands, but 5 years, a lot of money, right, is what I would interpret max level commitment to be, or at least more than any other team can offer, whether that's via the years or via the dollars. And look, if he says Siakam wants to be there and that is what the team hopes and what the player hopes, perhaps if there's mutual interest, and that's the case, it could end up at 5 for 220 something, right? When Tyler and I talked, I made up the fake 5 for 228 number because that is more money than any team can offer Siakam and still more than he could get per year than any other team could offer him because the Pacers can offer more raises in more years. So perhaps that's a way for the Pacers to save a little bit over the life of the deal. Maybe they want it all in the back. Who knows? So there's like a little bit of wiggle room even within this reporting. But I think the specifics of this are important, right? Because we've read from a lot of people for a long time that the expectation around the league is that these two parties will end up together after free agency. You have to have a certain level of percent tolerance chance to re-sign him to do this trade at all. And so the Pacers clearly thought that that percent was high enough. And so assuming all of these factors are the case and that all the reporting is correct, including these two reports from Shams that I'm talking about, I would wager that Siakam return is a very high likelihood and on a deal that would be longer because of that. But the specific details that matter that are new, I would say, are, we've heard Siakam said that he likes Indiana and the things he likes about it and how the team really gave him a home after, a tough period for him after being traded, right? He wants to be there is new from Shams, and that the specifically max level contract part of it matters too, not any major deal. So nothing huge there that's already been talked about. And Tyler and I dove through all those machinations, but to read it and share the reporting and the difference between what's been talked about and the reality there is important. Now, a more nuanced one of reporting here. Very interesting stuff from Mark Stein relating to a different client of Pascal Siakam's agent, Andrew Nembhard. That's only fresh in my brain because of draft prospect AJ Mitchell, who came through Indy on Wednesday, also is in that agency, and he mentioned it at his workout. The reason I bring up that part is also because Todd Ramasar is mentioned in the Mark Stein's report about Andrew Nembhard. And this I also mentioned in the extensions episode, but Mark Stein added more detail after that. So if you missed the first part of this, Mark Stein and his Substack, The Stein Line, first had a blurb about TJ McConnell and Chad Buchanan saying on the radio that the Pacers are hopeful they can keep McConnell for the rest of his career. I don't consider that a rumor because the GM said it. That's not a rumor. That's an on-the-record statement. The rumor part is Stein's reporting. The last paragraph of his Pacers segment from his, I believe, June 2nd article. I'll get the dates right because he has two back-to-back reports that include Pacers details. Yes, June 2nd, if you would like to find this yourself. It says, I scrolled too far away to get back to it. My apologies. It says that I don't know how to read and I can't find it again. It talks about Siakam and yes, here we go. The Pacers are also widely expected to re-sign Pascal Siakam this offseason to a lucrative new contract after acquiring Siakam from Toronto via trade in January. That part we just talked about. And then the second part is the new part. And likewise, come to terms on a contract extension with Andrew Nembhard after a string of strong playoff performances from the Canadian. Both players are represented by the same agent, and then it lists him and the agency. So widely expected to come to terms on a contract extension with Andrew Nembhard. I alluded to that on the extensions episode already, and that's a huge deal. If you have missed it or you haven't heard it on the show, McConnell and Jalen Smith and Andrew Nembhard could, in theory, all be extension eligible for the same extension. This is not – it could be below this amount, but the max would be 4 years, about $78.4 million. That's my current estimate, although it will change depending on where the estimated average salary lands for that season that it would officially start. So that's just an estimated number, but it would be roughly that, which I find fascinating for Andrew Nembhard. I've talked about the factors why I kind of wondered if he would take that and why I think the Pacers should be trying to jump all over that. And so I'll explain those dynamics first, and then we'll go through the extra reporting because Stein added more later that I haven't talked about here yet. But to me, the mid-level exception's climbing very fast, and we'll get close to $17 million, which would be the $17.5 million, be the first-year value of this rough extension for rough approximate extension for Nembhard, right? And he is certainly worth more than the non-tax pyramid level exception. So that's factor one here. Factor two is the Pacers have restricted free agency on the back end of his deal if they decline his team option. So they can guarantee themselves the chance to keep Andrew Nembhard in the future. So if that is the case and they have a very high budget on what they're willing to spend on him, then those are kind of conflicting dynamics, but those all suggest that Nembhard, if he knows he's going to be with the Pacers beyond next season on some new contract, should want it to be for a number that makes sense and a number that he feels like there's no way that something could go wrong and he wouldn't be worth that next year when he is a free agent, because I'd imagine they're going to make him a restricted free agent and not risk it in unrestricted free agency. So if he has a sensational season, could he get way more than 4 years for about $80 million? Maybe. Good starting guards get that. We'll see what Kentavious Caldwell-Pope gets this summer. I think Nembhard's certainly trending to be better than him at some point in the near future. But, I wonder if he thinks that a good season could get him more than that. But could a bad season end him closer to a 4 for 60 guy? Or if Mathurin explodes, could the Pacers think about their future with him differently? But they still have restricted free agency to keep him. So there are pros and cons for both sides to do or not do this. And Stein runs through some of them in his report and adds more details that I find endlessly fascinating about a potential Andrew Nembhard extension. Let's get to those in the second segment here, which we'll get to after we talk about the good folks over at Gametime, who make getting tickets to NBA games, including the finals, even faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from receipt, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. There's so many ways that Gametime is so valuable. It saves you time, it saves you money, and it gives you confidence. And I think all that's important with ticketing apps, and you know what you're going to get. All that to me is very important. When I bought tickets to watch the New York Liberty play last year in Barclays Center, I used Gametime. You can see the views from your seat, which I used to figure out where I wanted to sit. Knew about the section, but where do I want to sit? How close to the, other stuff in the arena do I want to be? They have flash deals and zone deals. They have their lowest price guarantee, where they will credit you the difference if you find tickets in the same section in a row for less. Your purchase is covered with a flexible customer service policy, and there's no hidden fees. So the price you see is the price you get. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets and NBA tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app. Create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We are back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, check out Locked On Celtics, up 3-0 in the final. Stayed up late, thought I was wasting my time, and it was a 21-point fourth quarter game. Then it was awesome, and the Celtics still hung on. Very trending towards this. We'll see how much the Mavs can pick it up. There's a chance the Pacers, by far, have the best point differential against Boston in the postseason, depending on how this goes. We're also very close to potentially O'Shea Brissett, NBA champion. Good for him after his time with the Pacers. He is in a great spot for his career in terms of winning a title and what it could look like with the Celtics. Continuing on Nembhard, the reason I wanted to add more from Stein is after that report he had on June 2nd, I believe it was June 5th now, a couple days later, June 6th, excuse me, he wrote more. He wrote the following. I wrote in Sunday's notes compilation about the Pacers' desire. Key thing here that I just said. Pacers' desire to sign Andrew Nembhard to a contract extension this offseason, in addition to the lucrative new deal that Indiana is expected to comfortably hash out with Siakam. So lots of fun adverbs there that are important to this, right? Comfortably with Siakam. Great. That's easy. That's good. Pacers' desire to sign Nembhard to an extension. Okay, so we know Pacers' side to get this done now. If I were in the Pacers front office, as I said on the extension episode, I would be trying to get it done right now because I think that's what solid starters are worth now, and Nembhard's only going to get better. But then Stein continues with more. He said Nembhard's case is far trickier. After his outstanding performance in the playoffs, Nembhard is increasingly considered by some rival teams a lead guard, meaning that he also might project as a player capable of generating a richer offer in down the road free agency that the Pacers can offer an extension this summer, which I just alluded to, right? If the MLE is going to go up and he's valued higher than it by other teams, then he could be a $25 million a year guy to someone, and then signing for 4 for 80 doesn't make a lot of sense. Stein continued with the Canadian emerge as a sturdy postseason complement to Tyrese Haliburton, yet with a scheduled salary of just $2 million next season. In the final year of his current deal, Nembhard will be restricted to tacking on 4 years due to CBA's limits on raises. That's the deal we just talked about. And then he mentions that something you heard here, which is that his extension couldn't happen until July 22nd. And then this part, the key at the end, if no extension materializes this summer, Indiana would have the option of making Nembhard a restricted free agent in the 2025 offseason with matching rights on any external offer he gets by declining his team option and then issuing a qualifying offer. So even if a team what the Pacers would be afraid of if they were going to lose him is someone comes in next summer, even in restricted free agency, and offers him like 4 for $130, and it's like $30 million a year, and they'd be a tax team and they can't afford it, and or they have to decide between him and Turner or something like that, right? That's the fear if they don't get an extension done now. Is that likely or possible? I don't know. I'd have to look at the cap space teams for next year. The cap's probably going to jump 10% next summer, but those are a lot of good details from Stein about, partially why the Pacers would want to do it, because potentially a team could jump in and do something like that, but also the downfalls of it, right? Yeah, that sounds great for Andrew Nembhard, right? A team thinks he's a lead guard and offers him a bunch of money next year. What if he has a not good season, right? What if he gets hurt? So there's a lot of factors at play here, especially for a guy who's only made the minimum his whole career. A little over the minimum earlier, but whatever. Does he want to suddenly make $80 million life-changing money, right? And if he knows restricted free agencies in the backdrop, is it worth playing the chicken and egg game and trying to prove that you're better than that? But then if you don't, you lose a lot of money. So it's hard to say. I actually think it's possible this gets done as an extension. I think the Pacers should want to. And if I'm the Pacers, I want to. And if I'm Andrew Nembhard, I probably am leaning a little out of it. But I might understand that like this might be what I get next year anyway. So why risk it for a year? And that's what he has to decide. If he plays out a season, what is the range of outcomes for him next year? And where would this current max extension land for him? So I do think I'd probably put this at like a 50-50 chance this gets done. Stein's second reporting was interesting after he said widely expected. So I'll be very curious where that lands. And that is the end of the offseason reports we've gotten. A good offseason report on TJ McConnell from Jake Fisher, which was not anything about the offseason at all, but did allude to more of the Phoenix Suns wanting him last season, which is very funny to me. There's just like one legal trade that is possible, and it's not even something that makes sense for the Pacers to do. And we haven't really heard any offseason stuff from credible insiders. Let me be very clear about that in the offseason so far. So good stuff in The Athletic is where you can find Chom stuff, or on FanDuel TV. And then all of Mark Stein stuff is in his Substack, The Stein Line. So let's pivot here and cover some ground that we haven't gotten to yet, and that is the rest of the Pacers free agents. Doug McDermott, James Johnson, Kendall Brown, and the two-way guys, and go a little more detail. We talked about them in the Pacers offseason outlook episode. Today I want to dive in a little more. Let's start with McDermott. He made a lot last year, and he'll make significantly less than that this year. And Caitlin and I both surmised on his season recap from last year that we don't think he'll be back on the Pacers this year. Here's why I think that, and then I'll talk about why I guess I would understand it if he was back, but it'd have to be under different terms. Is if I'm Doug McDermott right now at his age, I want to either have one of two things happen. I want to be on the Celtics or the Nuggets or something like that, where I'm contributing on a very good team. The Nuggets makes a lot of sense for him, actually. But contributing on a very good team where there's a chance I win my first championship, right? He's played for so many legendary coaches. He's made the conference finals now. He's been on lots of good teams in New York, in Chicago, and OKC, right? Even in Indiana, if you count the conference finals. So what is next for him? Is it that route? Go to a really good team, try to get a ring, really make your career awesome, because he just finished a big contract, right? That's the goal. He hit free agency at a great time after one of his best seasons. Now you try to build on that, and he did. So now it's either that or go to a team where he could play the most, right? If there's an opportunity where he could be in a rotation for 15, 20 minutes for someone, and then a chance to earn more in a future contract if he has a good season. Or option 3 would be taking the most money he could get, knowing that there may not be a lot of years where that is reality for him anymore, where there is a most money situation, right? So there's a lot for him to consider. And the reason I mention all that is the Pacers specifically, because they might have tax concerns if they bring back Obi and Pascal, because Jarris is coming up, because Ben Shepherd and Ben Mathurin will both be healthy, presumably to start next season, and because the Pacers, look, you can maybe call them a title contender. They're one of the last 4 teams left, but I don't think anyone considers them that right this second. They kind of don't check any of the boxes that make sense for the next Doug McDermott team, right? And at the same time, if I'm the Pacers, I don't know what they're personally thinking, but we got a glowing review of Jarris Walker from Chad Buchanan at his exit interview. So if they really believe Jarris is ready to step up into a more prominent role, then Jarris Walker should be ahead of Doug McDermott returning on a depth chart. So All that to say, is there a reason Doug McDermott would want to return to the Pacers? Well, yeah, if he likes the Pacers, I suppose that is it. But given the things that typically guys at his stage of a career arc want, it seems like an interesting fit already, especially with the resources involved. That said, we just did the small forward free agency episode with Alex Golden. And to me, something the Pacers should want is, if they can get it, a wing who can play in a pinch, who doesn't expect minutes, and would take like a small guaranteed minimum deal. Like that'd be great for the Pacers to have, because then if someone gets hurt or they can't rely on Jarris to start the season, even if Jarris is not in the rotation or something, if they need this wing to play, they're valuable, but they have to know they're not going to get minutes every night. Is Doug McDermott that guy? Does he fit into that group? It's hard to say, but that would be if he is back, that is the way that it makes sense to me, is if Doug McDermott knows he's behind Jarris, if there's injuries or rotation discussions at that spot. So Jarris, whatever spot he ends up, McDermott's behind him. He plays in a pinch, but is not expected to ever be in the rotation. If that is found on a minimum deal, then yeah, McDermott returning would make sense. Otherwise, it doesn't make as much sense. And that ties in to Kendall Brown, which we will talk about after the break, as well as James Johnson and the two-way guys. But my prediction for Doug McDermott, that he's not back with the Pacers. We'll see, though. We'll see. Let's talk about some more free agent stuff to close out today's show. Before we do that, though, let's talk about PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app, where you just pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections. And with PrizePicks, you can turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game. Watching your favorite sports this summer, make PrizePicks in as little as 60 seconds. You just need to pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're locked in. They have promotions all the time. They're America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. Over 5 million active members, so you can get on the action too. And with the finals going on in the NHL and the NBA, you can dive in with the star players. It's boosted payouts. And when the finals are over, the hoops action does not stop. Women's basketball is rolling. Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, Brianna Stewart, Asia Wills. You can up to 100 times your money watching them play well, either with PrizePicks. For example, Caitlin Clark, more than or less than 3.5 3-pointers made. Or Brianna Stewart, more than or less than 23 points. That's how you play. You can do that for the NBA and NHL as well. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's the PrizePicks app with the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100 at PrizePicks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. We are back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Check out Locked On Mavs to hear the can they do this? Come back from 3-0 talk, and why the Celtics are kicking their butt in a way that I thought the Celtics would win the series. I'm actually surprised how many people picked the Mavs, but I am not surprised that people did pick the Mavs because they're good. And I am surprised that they're up 3-0, even though 2 of the games have been within 5 in the final couple minutes. Celtics have felt very dominant. I am surprised by that, even though I was surprised by people's predictions coming into it as well. I thought this would be more in the middle than it is, even though I would have picked the Celtics in 6. Dominance from them so far, up 3-0. Locked On Mavs to hear about half of that series. Let's continue here with some of the Pacers back-end free agents. So McDermott, my prediction is he's gone. What does that mean for Kendall Brown, who plays the same position? Kendall Brown, as it stands right this second, me talking to you, is not a free agent. He actually has a contract that is non-guaranteed for $2.1 million next season, and then a non-guaranteed team option the following season for $2.3 million, his minimum. Right, his two-way deal got converted in March, and he's in a really interesting situation because his contract's non-guaranteed. $250,000 of it gets guaranteed on opening night, the first day of the season, right? So that is kind of a decision point where the Pacers have to decide, not is Kendall Brown worth keeping on the team? Is Kendall Brown worth keeping on the team for $250,000 for some amount of time? And then they could reconvene later. So if McDermott's gone, he is a depth wing, but are you confident he can play if there's injuries or young guys aren't performing? Maybe not. He is also a young guy. They did trade stuff to get him in the draft. Now they've had him for 2 years in their system. Maybe they view it as 1 or 1.5 because he got hurt last year. But still, what do they think of him, right? They think of him as someone who could still grow into something. If so, should McDermott be gone, maybe they think, yeah, we could keep him around. But what I think will happen is that he will be on the Summer League roster with a kind of like a final prove it kind of chance, right? And if he gets a good two-way offer from a good team, or even an offer with more guaranteed money from a good team, I'd imagine the Pacers would just do the favor and waive him. But either way, I have a guess, and just because this logically makes the most sense, that he would do Summer League And if it goes fantastic, maybe they consider bringing him into training camp. And if that goes fantastic and he looks like he's a better player, ready to be more involved if there's a need for him, then they could just keep him into the season. But if he is not a good summer league player, they could waive him then. Or if he makes it through summer league but isn't good in camp, they could waive him then. Similar-ish to, if you remember, Dwayne Washington. And I don't know officially what the Pacers would have done if Ayton wasn't a thing that summer, because Dwayne Washington got waived as a part of that. But his guarantee date was earlier in the offseason. But he played in summer league with a chance to kind of fight for that guaranteed money and did not have a good summer league that year. After having an okay rookie year for the Pacers, he did not have a good summer league at all. And then when the Ayton stuff was happening and they needed the cap space, he got waived, right? That could kind of be what this looks like for Kendall Brown. That said, between an external minimum free agent or the 36th pick, would you rather have that or those things or Kendall Brown on the team? I might lean towards the external factors. In a bad draft, is pick 36 worth more than a flyer on Kendall Brown who's already on your team? I don't know. That's probably pretty close. Is there an external free agent that you like more? Maybe. That depends on what the Pacers are actually looking at. But it feels like there's enough uses of that roster spot because there's no money. It's sunk cost that my guess with it, he's not back, but he has chances to be back by playing well in situations that some of them will be able to see and some of them we won't. So that is, I don't know that he'll be on the summer league team, but just given his contract situation and age and ability, it makes a lot of sense that he would be on the Pacers summer league roster. His third summer league, but he's shown some growth in the league. But I'd be very curious what his summer league looks like. If it doesn't go well, then my guess would be that Kendall Brown is gone. That non-guarantee, they have potentially a way to then just either draft somebody with 36 to fill that spot, sign a free agent for a minimum deal, or even a non-guaranteed minimum. Who knows? James Johnson, not a lot to say here. No basketball stuff to say. He is the guy. The Pacers love him. They love him. And I mean the Pacers like the roster. They love having him around. And I do think people talk about just make him an assistant coach. Like, okay, sure. I do think there's some value of the guy being in the trenches with you at practice and on the grind and all that. But he is effectively an assistant coach or like that kind of veteran mentor. He doesn't do coaching activities per se, but it's just different when you're a player and I could see him play 3-on-3 or scrimmage with guys all the time when we're at practice. Either way, if the Pacers want James Johnson back, they'll have him back. If he doesn't want to play anymore, maybe they won't. I have no idea where that's headed. There's really not a lot to analyze besides they love him. And if they want to keep it going, I'd imagine they will, because he's an awesome culture fit. They clearly like a lot of the toughness elements that he brings. Funny guy, fits in well with this younger group. I wonder what the situation will be there. Maybe that's the way they could open up a roster spot for a draft pick. But I'd say 50-50 there as well. Last year, they really liked him, and they didn't bring him in at first until they cleared up a roster spot in December. Or I guess they had the roster spot and didn't bring him in until December. But I'll be curious if they opt to bring him to camp. They don't, whatever, who knows. And the last stuff to talk about that I haven't really talked about at all, my prediction would be 51% Johnson back, 49% gone, just to lean on an official side. So far, I've predicted of the Pacers non-Siakam top and free agents, McDermott gone, Kendall Brown gone, James Johnson back. So they'd have 2 roster spots in Tony land now. They're two-way guys. What's going to be the deal there? They could make any of them restricted free agents, Quentin Jackson, Isaiah Wong, Oscar Tshiebwe, if they wanted to keep them. Two-way restricted free agency would suck. It'd be super weird for the players. It's like a thing, I guess, but not really. I think if I had to rank them, well, it's kind of, let's go through some situations. I think Quentin Jackson's the best player of the 3. That dude can score. He's really shifty. He didn't play much for the Pacers because he got signed pretty late, but he did good stuff for the Mad Ants. That alone, like, he's good. He has 2 years of NBA service. Might be worth keeping, or like, again, exploring in a summer league setting, see if he looks awesome, and then you could keep him there if you have him as a restricted free agent. Hey, Kendall Brown last year floated through after coming off a 2-way deal, floated through summer league with no contract, and then got a 2-way deal, right? And he had some good moments in summer league and some bad ones, but that is a reality for all these guys potentially to think about fighting for this summer. 2-ways are guaranteed money. So Quentin Jackson is that reality, and maybe he can get another. He was in training camp for the Bulls last year. Like, he's good enough to maybe get that kind of offer somewhere else. So if he likes the Pacers, maybe he'd be willing to just wait and think about a camp deal before Mad Antsing next year. But I think he'll kind of canvass the league, see what's out there for him. Would you rather have, an undrafted 2-way guy or your 50th pick than Quentin Jackson? 50th pick, maybe undrafted. I don't know. He's pretty good. There's also Oscar. Wow, that was horrible. Tshiebwe, who was the rebounding god of the G League and had a wonderful season and won some G League awards and probably isn't ready for the NBA just yet. Needs a little bit more jumper, a little bit more defensive focus, a little bit more offensive cohesion all the time. But he would instantly be one of the best 1 or 2 rebounders on the Pacers. So can you do better than that on a two-way? Probably not. I think that, he's a guy, he is the ideal guy to develop on a two-way, right? Has an awesome elite level skill, has a lot to work on, right? They got him on an undrafted deal. He wanted to be close to Lexington. He liked Indiana. He came in. Can they, especially if Jalen Smith opts out and there's potential for him to maybe play more, would he be willing to take a two-way again to stick with the Pacers? Again, could be like Kendall Brown last year, where summer league is very important, a theme of the day. I would try to keep him around, I guess, but who knows what he wants or what the Pacers think there. Isaiah Wong, I don't expect to be back. Just didn't click and grow as a point guard enough to me. He can score pretty well. We'll see. He did make it through the whole season, appeared in 3 games. So we'll see what happens there. I think he's the least likely of the 3 to be back. The questions are here. They have 2 late picks, 49 and 50, which is, in my head, there's a cutoff line for where the two-ways start and where if you get picked before this line, you get a standard deal. And there are some exceptions every year, but in my head, it's somewhere between like 43 and 47. And 49 and 50 already feel like two-way slots to me, especially so for a team like the Pacers who don't have a ton of roster spots available. So they could pick both of them. And then keep Oscar Tshiebwe. But they also have Mojave King floating out there, and they lose his rights if they don't sign him to something this summer. That feels like it could be headed for a two-way, maybe not for a long time, but for some amount of time. He played for the G League team last year, if you don't know about that. So it is possible to me that the Pacers, to tie this all together, could trade or sell or something. Selling draft pick sucks, but get rid of one of their late seconds. And then their two-way guys next year be Tshiebwe, Mojave King, and whoever they pick, for example. But because there's so many options of stuff for them to do between the 2 draft picks and Mojave King, I think it's possible none of their two-way guys are back, and they take a different bite of the apple. But if I had to rank their chances of being back, I think I originally didn't say this, but now that I've thought more about it, I think the chances they're back, the list would be Tshiebwe 1, Jackson 2, Wong 3. But if it was just purely ranked on talent, I think Jackson would be the top of that list. And that is the end of my free agency preview for the smaller stuff with a little more detail. The first time we just ran through the actual parameters of the stuff. This time we ran through it. So of the free agents not named Pascal Siakam and Obi Toppin, who merited full podcasts, I would say James Johnson and Oscar Tshiebwe are the 2 guys that I talked about today that I think have the best chance of being back, and McDermott would probably be 3rd for me there. If you have questions or think I missed something, I'm on Twitter at Tony R. East. You can tweet at me there. And this podcast is there at Locked On Pacers. Tomorrow, back player season reviews with Caitlin Cooper, doing centers, Myles Turner, Jalen Smith, Isaiah Jackson. Really looking forward to it. And then after that, I have a plan. We'll see if I stick to it because it might depend on what happens and how this all works out with the earlier free agency timing. And if the reporting changes, then yeah, we have to go right away. And then we'll figure out the rest of the shows till the draft. So we'll see. Only one more easy and obvious episode to come. Hope you guys enjoyed today's show. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you very soon.